It's easy to believe that silence means absence, that stillness means abandonment, that when no message arrives, nothing is listening. And yet, what if the very silence you fear is the language of the universe responding to your soul? What if what you call loneliness is simply the moment before the answer appears? In a world constantly buzzing with noise, our minds have been conditioned to believe that only the loud, the visible, the immediate is real. But reality, as both science and ancient wisdom remind us, is far more subtle. Joe Dispenza teaches that we are not waiting for life to happen. We are broadcasting life with every thought, emotion, and vibration we emit. Carl Jung reminds us that within each of us lies the collective unconscious, a vast and sacred ocean where symbols, dreams, and inner truths speak louder than words. And so, if you are here wondering whether anyone, anything is listening, I invite you to consider that you are not alone. That question pulsing in your chest, it's not a weakness, it's a signal. That ache you feel in the stillness, it's not emptiness. It's the universe preparing to reveal something you've been ready for far longer than you realize. This isn't about manifesting fast or forcing outcomes. This is about attuning your inner frequency to what already exists beyond your five senses. When you shift from begging for answers to embodying the question, you don't chase meaning, you become it. The universe doesn't respond to your words, it responds to your alignment. And right now, as you listen, something ancient and intelligent is listening back. The silent space where the universe listens to what you forgot you were asking for. There are moments in life when the absence of a sign feels like a punishment. When everything is quiet and still, we start to believe we've been forgotten by people, by life, and by whatever divine force we once hoped was guiding us. This emptiness can feel suffocating, but what if that stillness isn't emptiness? What if it's a sacred pause, an energetic preparation? The universe doesn't move at the speed of your fear. It moves at the rhythm of your readiness. And often, the answers you're desperate to hear can only be received in the moments when you're finally quiet enough to listen. The craving for immediate answers is not simply impatience. It's a byproduct of a culture that has lost its connection to stillness. In the age of notifications, algorithms, and instant results, we've forgotten how to speak the ancient language of waiting. We confuse activity with progress, noise with connection, certainty with safety. But the realm of manifestation doesn't operate through urgency. It responds to alignment. Joe Dispenza has shown that when we activate coherent brain and heart waves, when thought and emotion synchronize, we don't just hope for answers. We become a vibrational match to their arrival. That shift is not mental, it's electromagnetic, and it cannot occur in the chaos of inner desperation. There's something quietly miraculous that happens when you let go of the demand to know when or how your desires will arrive. In that surrender, your energy shifts from resistance to receptivity. The more you insist, the more you're unknowingly emitting a frequency of lack. Not because you're asking for something wrong, but because you're vibrating the belief that it's not here yet. The universe doesn't need your effort. It needs your emotional congruence. And this congruence is not loud. It doesn't scream in affirmations. It whispers in presence, in trust, in stillness. There's a reason why many spiritual traditions point to silence as a gateway to the divine. Not because silence is mystical in itself, but because it reveals what's been buried under all the noise. It reawakens the ancient part of you that already knows. That's why the moments that feel like abandonment are often the ones in which your field is being cleared for the new. But we misinterpret the pruning for punishment. We see the pause as failure, forgetting that the space between intention and manifestation is where alignment is forged. Not in words, but in energy. It may seem counterintuitive, but the universe listens more closely when we stop trying so hard to be heard. The quiet moments of your life are not voids. They are doorways. Carl Jung once wrote that loneliness is not the absence of people, but the inability to communicate the things that matter most. And yet, your soul is always communicating, through sensation, through imagery, through longing. The question is, are you listening to the parts of yourself that don't speak in language? Because that's exactly where the universe is already responding. Imagine a violin string. It only begins to vibrate when another note of matching frequency is played. Your desires are like that string. The answer already exists. It simply waits for you to become the resonance that calls it into vibration. This isn't wishful thinking, it's resonance science. Your heart emits an electromagnetic field more powerful than your brain, and it changes according to your emotional state. When you stop forcing answers and start cultivating the feeling of what it would be like to already have them, you become a magnet for experiences that align with that frequency. You are not being ignored, you are being prepared. The stillness you're in now is not evidence of absence. It's an invitation to deepen your awareness, to sit with yourself, not as a victim of silence, but as a participant in the sacred process of becoming. When you shift from pleading to presence, something extraordinary happens. The field responds. Not because it suddenly heard you, but because you finally became a match for what it's been echoing all along. And so, in the hours where nothing seems to move, trust that something invisible is calibrating. The silence is not blank space, it is sacred space. It is the breath between the question and the answer, the inhale before the manifestation exhales into form. When you allow yourself to stay present in that space without resistance, without rushing, without needing proof, you begin to notice what was always speaking, not in words, but in frequency, in symbol, in synchronicity. This is where the universe whispers back, "I've been here all along." The illusion of abandonment and the unseen cry of your frequency. There is a particular kind of pain that doesn't announce itself with tears. It lives in the subtle undercurrent of daily life, in the quiet disconnection that lingers even when everything appears fine on the outside. This is the pain of spiritual abandonment, a deep, aching suspicion that you've been left behind by the very force you once trusted to guide you. And the most disorienting part, you might not even realize it's happening, because on the surface you're functioning. You're doing the visualizations, you're repeating the affirmations, you're reading the books and following the practices. But deep within, your vibration is pleading, "Where is my answer? Why does it still feel like nothing is shifting?" This isn't a failure of your practice. It's a sign of a deeper disconnect between what you believe you're asking for and what you're actually vibrating. The unconscious emits more energy than your words ever will. If there is a silent cry of, "I'm not safe, I'm not seen, I've been forgotten," it echoes louder in the field than any declaration of abundance or trust. And this echo doesn't just sit in your frequency, it becomes a magnet, not because the universe is cruel, but because it mirrors your emotional coherence. When the inner child within you is trembling in fear, while the adult you declares trust in divine timing, the vibration is fractured. And the universe doesn't respond to your mask, it responds to your essence. That fractured state often originates in early emotional wounds. Perhaps you learned that asking for too much led to disappointment, or that being vulnerable meant being left behind. Over time, those lessons calcify into protective beliefs. "I'll just do everything alone. If I don't expect anything, I can't be hurt." These strategies are brilliant in their own way. They kept you safe, but they also block the flow of receiving, because to receive fully, you must be willing to feel, to be open, to surrender control. And that surrender can feel terrifying when your nervous system still believes that surrender equals abandonment. Carl Jung spoke of the wounded child archetype, not as a flaw to be fixed, but as a sacred presence within us that holds the key to integration. When we ignore that child, the vibration of abandonment continues to cycle beneath the surface, creating an energetic dissonance. And this dissonance doesn't just delay manifestations, it creates lives that are technically fine, but spiritually starved, where things look okay on paper, yet something vital feels missing. That something is wholeness. The sense that you are truly held, not just intellectually but somatically, not just in theory but in the fabric of your being. In this state, many seekers unconsciously use spirituality as a coping mechanism. They chase practices and rituals not to connect with the divine but to run from their pain, and the universe in its infinite intelligence responds by pausing the delivery, not as punishment, but as invitation, to slow down, to feel what you've been overriding. Because manifestation is not about escaping the pain, it's about transmuting it into alignment. You cannot vibrate wholeness while denying the parts of you that feel broken. You cannot attract love while secretly believing you're too much or not enough. The frequency is too tangled, and so the real alchemy begins not when you receive the external result, but when you allow the emotional truth to rise to the surface without shame. When you sit with your inner child and say, "I see you. I hear that you're scared, and I won't abandon you for the sake of looking spiritual. That's when your field begins to clear. That's when the invisible fog starts to lift. Because your essence no longer has to scream for attention, it's finally being witnessed. The paradox is this: your most powerful frequency emerges when you stop pretending to be powerful, when you allow softness to replace performance, when you admit that you're tired of trying to prove your worth to the universe. That moment of honest vulnerability recalibrates your vibration more than 1,000 mantras spoken through clenched teeth. It invites coherence. It restores trust, not just in the field, but in your own capacity to be whole while still healing. The metaphor is often used of a seed beneath the soil. It feels buried, forgotten, alone. But something is happening in the dark. The roots are forming. The structure is strengthening. And only when the conditions are right, when the seed has released resistance and surrendered to the soil, does the sprout emerge. You are not buried. You are being rooted. And the pain you interpret as delay may be the very depth your foundation needs to hold the abundance that's coming. So when the feeling of abandonment rises, pause before you try to silence it. Ask instead, what part of me believes it's been left behind? What story am I still vibrating from childhood, heartbreak, or failure? And what would it feel like to let that part of me speak, without interruption, without fixing, without shame? Because when you listen to the voice beneath the silence, you'll often hear the exact message the universe has been waiting for you to say: I'm ready to be held. And that readiness is not a shout, it's a frequency. A steady, unwavering signal that says, I don't need to control, I don't need to rush, I only need to be in resonance. The universe cannot abandon what is made of it. You were never left behind, only redirected back to yourself. And that return? That sacred re-encounter with the core of your being? That's where the true manifestation begins. When the mind desires but the energy resists, the internal conflict that blocks the response, desire is often mistaken for alignment. We assume that wanting something intensely is enough to call it into our reality. But the universe doesn't measure your longing. It reads your signal. And that signal is not emitted from your words, your vision board, or your affirmations. It comes from the emotional resonance behind your wanting. What you feel when you're not watching, when you're not performing, when you're simply being, that's the frequency the universe responds to. And when the mind wants something but the energy resists it, a contradiction arises that blocks the very thing you're trying to manifest. This contradiction is not a moral flaw or a spiritual failure. It is a split, a fracture between your conscious desire and your unconscious belief. On the surface, you may say you want love, abundance, healing, but beneath, there may be a lingering belief that you are not worthy of it, that it will hurt when it comes, that it always disappears. And so, while your lips speak hope, your energy vibrates fear, doubt, or protection. This creates an energetic tug of war. The field around you, intelligent and neutral, receives a mixed signal, and instead of drawing your vision toward you, it mirrors back your confusion. Joe Dispenza speaks to this with piercing clarity. He explains that when the brain and the heart are out of coherence, the signal you broadcast becomes static. You can have a clear intention in your mind, but if your heart is closed, constricted, or guarded, the energy that flows through your field is distorted. And in this distortion, manifestation becomes fragmented, not because the universe is punishing you, but because your frequency is speaking two languages at once. One says, I want this. The other says, but I don't believe it's safe. And the field always honors your truest signal, your emotional truth over your mental desire. This is why some people can work relentlessly on their inner goals, yet find themselves stuck in repetitive cycles. Not because they are lazy or uncommitted, but because they are misaligned at the level of vibration. Their subconscious is pulling in one direction while their conscious effort pushes in another. And the result is stagnation, frustration, even spiritual burnout. You feel like you're doing everything right, but nothing changes. And that nothing becomes evidence to your unconscious mind that manifestation doesn't work, deepening the loop of resistance. It's important to understand that this misalignment often stems from unprocessed emotional history. Our nervous systems are not just biological, they are spiritual recorders. Every time we experienced loss, abandonment, betrayal, or fear, a part of us learned to associate desire with danger. And unless that emotional charge is integrated, the moment we get close to receiving what we asked for, a hidden alarm goes off. The energy contracts, the pattern repeats, and manifestation is deferred once again, not because you are broken, but because your energy still believes safety lies in avoidance. So how do you resolve this inner conflict? Not by effort, not by doubling down on visualization techniques, but by creating coherence, first within yourself, then in your field. This coherence is not about being perfect, it is about being honest, about noticing where your energy flinches, where it tenses, where it whispers, "I'm not ready," even as your mind insists, "I am." And once you locate that resistance, you don't fight it. You witness it, you breathe with it, you let it speak. Because when that internal fear feels acknowledged instead of suppressed, it begins to soften. And in that softening, alignment is restored. There is a subtle yet powerful shift that occurs when you stop chasing outcomes and start calibrating your frequency, when you care less about what you are trying to attract and more about who you are becoming in the process. Manifestation, then, becomes less about acquiring things and more about embodying states. You stop asking for love and begin to become it. You stop reaching for abundance and begin to live as if lack is no longer your identity. And from this state, not pretending, not forcing, but genuinely being, the universe no longer needs to respond. It simply reflects. Consider the metaphor of a radio station. If you are tuned into 91.3 FM but hoping to hear what's playing on 104.7 FM, no amount of desire will change what you receive. You must shift the frequency, not out of desperation, but out of congruence. When your inner world begins to match the reality you desire, the external world must follow, not by magic, but by law. Your life becomes a natural extension of your inner coherence. The most powerful alignment begins when you become deeply aware of the internal voices that contradict your outer goals, and you meet them not with judgment, but with compassion. You tell the part of you that's afraid of success, "I see why you're scared, but you're not alone anymore." You tell the part that's used to chaos, "It's okay to feel peace now." And most of all, you tell the wounded part, "You're allowed to receive." Because sometimes the hardest thing for the soul is not to let go, but to let in. When the mind wants and the energy resists, you are split between becoming and hiding. The integration of these two parts is not a process of force, it is a practice of presence. Presence that sees, that listens, that honors, and that gradually reorients your entire frequency from fear into openness. That's when the field responds. That's when life begins to echo back what you are finally aligned with. Not because it changed, but because you did. The answer arrives when you stop looking for it in the wrong time. There is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes not from waiting, but from resisting the timing of life, from pushing against what is, while obsessing over what should be. This is the fatigue of spiritual impatience, a quiet but chronic urgency to make things happen, faster, louder, sooner. We often don't realize that this urgency is not a sign of spiritual focus, but of vibrational incoherence. Because when we become addicted to knowing when, we disconnect from the wisdom of how. And in that disconnection, the very thing we're trying to attract begins to drift further away, not because it's inaccessible, but because our energy has left the present moment, where all manifestation begins. The human mind is conditioned to perceive time linearly, past, present, future, but the quantum field doesn't operate in hours or days. It responds to states, to coherence, to emotion. Gregg Braden describes this beautifully. Time in the energetic sense is not a straight path. It's a resonance field, a dynamic interplay between frequency and alignment, which means what you believe is not yet may already exist in another timeline of possibility, waiting for you to match it, not in schedule but in soul. This is where many seekers stumble. They do the visualizations, they hold the vision, but internally they measure their progress by time. It's been 3 months, why hasn't it arrived? That measurement creates a vibration of lack disguised as logic. The subconscious translates time delay as energetic failure. And so, the more they count the days, the more they amplify the gap between their current state and the one they're trying to reach. This is not just psychological, it's vibrational. The more your awareness fixates on not having, the more you radiate the energy of absence. And the field, always mirroring your signal, responds accordingly. There is no formula for divine timing, but there is a pattern. The answer arrives when you stop needing it as proof that you are worthy, when the longing becomes quiet and the gratitude becomes louder, when your frequency stops screaming, "I need," and starts whispering, "I trust." This is not passive waiting, it's an active surrender, a willingness to anchor into the present so deeply that the future has no choice but to unfold through you. One of the most powerful metaphors for this is the story of the Chinese bamboo tree. After planting the seed, nothing happens for years. No visible growth, no evidence of life. But under the soil, a complex root system is forming. Foundations are being established to support something extraordinary. And then, in a matter of weeks, the bamboo shoots up more than 80 feet. Not because it suddenly decided to grow, but because the groundwork was complete. You are the seed and the soil. Your delay is not your denial. It is your deepening. The mind resists this truth because it craves control. It wants to dictate timelines, set expectations, track outcomes. But the soul knows that real manifestation requires devotion, not deadlines. That alignment is not a transaction. It's a transformation. And this transformation doesn't happen in the future. It happens now. In how you breathe, in how you hold yourself when nothing seems to change, in how you treat your own heart when results feel far away. If your nervous system believes that receiving must be rushed, your energy will never truly open to what is already present. We must unlearn the belief that speed equals success. In the quantum field, speed is irrelevant. Frequency is everything. A single moment of deep embodied coherence can collapse timelines faster than months of mental effort. Because in that moment, you're not trying to make something happen. You're becoming the version of yourself for whom it already has. And the field will not argue with that truth. It will simply reorganize itself to match it. The key lies in shifting from a transactional relationship with the universe to a relational one. In a transaction, you offer effort and expect a return. In a relationship, you cultivate presence, trust, and resonance. You don't demand, you align. And from that alignment, life begins to move, not on your schedule but in your favor. Many people unconsciously sabotage their manifestations, not by doing the wrong things, but by timing their faith. They give themselves arbitrary deadlines. If nothing changes by this date, I'll stop believing. This conditional trust fragments their vibration. It turns spiritual connection into a contract, but the field doesn't operate under negotiation. It responds to coherence, not ultimatums. So what happens when you stop asking, "When will it come?" and start asking, "Who am I being as I wait?" That question is not rhetorical, it's transformative. It invites you to release your grip on time and enter the present moment as if it already contains everything you asked for. Because energetically it does. You're not calling something from the future, you're collapsing it into the now. The practice then is not to visualize harder, but to embody deeper. To walk as if the answer is on its way because vibrationally it already is. To trust that the pause is not a punishment, but a preparation. That the waiting is not empty, it's sacred. And that your greatest alignment might come not in the rush toward what you want, but in the rest that teaches you how to receive it. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not being tested by time. You are being tuned. And the more you surrender to that tuning, not with resignation but with reverence, the more you'll realize the answer has never been far. It has always been as close as your next aligned breath. The universe responds when you become the living question. You are not lost. You are not invisible. You are not alone. These are not spiritual affirmations. They are energetic truths waiting to be remembered. The silence you fear is not the absence of answers. It is the spaciousness required for the answer to emerge. The delays you resent are not denials, they are calibrations, invitations to deepen, to align, to embody the version of yourself who no longer begs the universe for signs, but lives as the very signal it responds to. Manifestation is not about forcing a future, it is about becoming so vibrationally aligned with your desire that time becomes irrelevant. Napoleon Hill said, "What the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve." But Neville Goddard took it one step further. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Because it's not about waiting for confirmation, it's about becoming it. Right now. The universe doesn't operate on hope. It flows through certainty, not the kind born from logic, but the kind born from embodiment. You are the channel, the vessel, the architect of your experience, not because you control every detail, but because you decide what frequency you live in. The most sacred truths don't shout, they resonate. And when you start listening to your life, not with judgment but with attunement, you begin to hear what has always been there. You were never meant to manifest from lack, but from knowing. You were never meant to chase outcomes, but to harmonize with them. You were never meant to wait for permission to receive. The universe has already said yes. It's waiting for you to say it back, not in words, but in vibration. So ask yourself, if you knew you were already supported, already seen, already heard, how would you show up differently right now? Because that shift, that subtle, sacred change, is the doorway, and you've already stepped through it. What if the feeling you're avoiding is the very bridge to the life you're trying to create? If that question moved something inside you, don't let it fade. Subscribe to the channel so this space can continue to support your transformation. And stay with us. The next video on your screen is not random, it's your next step. Keep watching, keep aligning. The universe is listening,